And it came to pass that those Lamanites who had united with the Nephites were numbered among the Nephites, and their curse was taken from them, and their
Nice.
skin
Oh,
became white
no.
like
They
unto
became
the
white.
Nephites.
All right.
Now,
All right.
let me ask
Abracadabra.
this. Let me ask this, folks. When Samuel the Lamanite was preaching to the bad Nephites, was his skin white and delightsome? No, it was not. But now all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we said this was supposed to happen when they become good guys. So we better write this now because we're stupid. Yeah. Okay.
I just, please, Shannon, can you just read that verse one more time? And I want to share a story.
You did it in your real voice.
This is 3 Nephi.
Chapter 2,
we're
verse
3
15.
Nephi, chapter 2, verse 15.
Yeah.
And their curse was taken from them, and their skin became white like unto the Nephites.
Go ahead and read the next one. Read the
And
next
their
one.
young
after.
men and their daughters became exceedingly fair, and they were numbered among the Nephites and were called Nephites, and thus ended the 13th year.
There you go. That's how you know God's chosen people. Skin color. That is
just
what
their
the book
countenance.
just fucking said.
It's just their countenance.
It's
That's
just
all.
it's when you see somebody walking down the street at night with a hood on, you cross the street. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. No. Right there. That all right. Now the story. I remember being maybe 9 or 10 years old, and I have to credit my because I have one older sibling. And this older sibling is responsible for, as Mormons or ex-Mormons say, breaking my shelf, or putting at least weighted objects on my shelf that would then crack it. And one of the earliest memories that I have about Book of Mormon scripture study was my older sibling telling me that people say the Book of Mormon was racist. So I searched every single passage I could possibly find in this book to find the N-word anywhere in this book, and I couldn't find it. Because in my 9-year-old mind, that's how racism worked, right?
Yeah.
If somebody says the N-word, therefore they are a racist, and anything short of that is not racism. I didn't have the faculties to evaluate when it talks about literal skin color becoming white, like unto the Nephites, that is blessed. I didn't have the faculties to evaluate that is a racist passage, that therefore shows that this book is a tome of white supremacy. I didn't know it at the time. I'm older and wiser now, and I can definitely evaluate this text and say, this is a tome of white supremacy. The Book of Mormon is 19th century white supremacy, and every religion that holds to it today is a white supremacist religion. That passage right there tells it unequivocally. There is no getting out. There is no apologetically backing out of this. There is no redefining of terms that makes non-racist sense. That is a racist passage. There is no way around it.
None. Yeah, exactly. And, Mormons will say, oh, well, it's not being racist to say that because President Kimball, who loved Native American people, talked to it from the pulpit about Native Americans that are put into the Indian replacement program, and they started turning white as well. And it's like they don't get it. They don't see it. Yeah. So
has anyone ever argued that? I mean, because I understand that there are black Mormons now.
Yep.
Has anyone ever argued that if you're black and you become a Mormon, I mean, are you not actually saved or whatever the hell? Are you not genuine unless you turn white?
That's what
they walked. Yeah.
Go ahead. Right. Okay. I've got a cough, so you say it.
They walked away from that in about the 1950s to 1960s as the civil rights movement was putting a lot of pressure on American politics. The Mormon Church backed away from the rhetoric, but prior to that, that was a very common rhetoric, common refrain in the church that people who convert to this, the Lamanites, this was the impetus behind the Indian placement program, as it was known, was that these Lamanites who are converted to the church and begin practicing it and begin living worthy Mormon lives, that their skin color will turn whiter. And Spencer Kimball in the early 1970s said from the pulpit that you said, or you referenced, Shannon, that their skin was turning whiter. Like, this was a belief that was retained in the church until the 1970s, when God changed his mind about black people. But it's something that was taught so much that the older generations of the church, many of them still believe this. This is a teaching that is not disavowed by a lot of older, more conservative Mormons. Let's just say they believe in the fundamentals of the religion. They believe in the scriptures of the religion, in spite of the fact that the corporate Mormon church recognizes that the scriptures are racist, and they themselves have disavowed these passages and have tried to mishmash and try and massage it to be not racist.
Right.
There are still a lot of Mormons who still remain racist and they have this passage. They have passages like this to bolster their racism and give it the stamp of approval.
Even a lot of time the racism is there and is not seen, because it's looked at as, well, white people are have economical advantages and all of these things. And so of course they're a chosen people, because their position from the beginning has been to be chosen and be higher financially.
And there's no recognition
everything.
of systemic oppression.
Exactly.
They don't recognize it. Well, and it's like there's the Black Menaces, who are Black BYU students who do have a TikTok channel, and they will just go around and ask people, other BYU students, questions. They do it at the U of U sometimes too. But one of them, he talked at Sunstone a couple of years ago about being on his mission, and that his companion, who came from Mexico, brought up one thing, and he was like, see, because they were reading something in the Book of Mormon, but he says, when we die and go to heaven, our skin will turn white. And he looked at him, the one, and he says, then I'd rather go to hell. And it's like his companion was just stunned that he found that offensive. But that's what you run into in Mormonism is you have those who will say it, who have darker skin even, and think it that way. And then there's those with darker skin who are like, no, this is shit. This is wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. And so it's a division in the church itself. Yes.
Well, like that division, these are old wounds that have never healed. And to represent this fact and evidence, I will point to Jonathan Strader published a parody, a satirical apology by the church that basically apologized for all the racism and announced that the church was going to form a new committee to essentially do as the Prophet Nelson had said, to root out racism out of the passages, or passages like this out of the scriptures of the church. And it was satirically done, but the problem is it was satirically done too accurate to the source material, and a lot of people believed that it was a genuine apology by the corporate church for its institutional
finally
racism.
The church is stepping up and stuff. But
and then
it was incredible.
to have to realize it was all fake. That was painful. I mean, it's not something I can laugh at, because that was
so crazy. It's ingenious, really.
It was incredibly
I have a story about this
painful
too.
on that one.
Well, and let me before you tell your story, Aaron, and Shannon, what you're saying very specifically was there's a very public facing and well-known Black women's faithful
Sisters in
Mormon
Zion,
social account that's called Sisters in Zion, and they took Jonathan Strader to task for publishing this, because essentially what he had done was, as a white person, he leveraged the institutional racism of the church and basically made a whipping boy out of the Black believing community to make an example out of the church's racism. And the people who were victimized were believing Black members. And the number of posts of people who faithful Black LDS members who saw this as turning over a new leaf, who saw this as a major step forward for the church, to have that immediately pulled away from them, just re-victimized and re-salted this unhealed wound. So
Mhm.
this
Yeah,
was
that's
something
terrible.
that, like you say, Shannon, you can't laugh at it because it caused a lot of damage. But at the same time, Gazalem, like you're saying, it was ingenious in the way that it was done and in its approach, because it really made the institutional racism the focus, the narrative, the central
Shame on the
problem.
church.
Exactly. And that's who deserves the shame here. That, like, I don't think that shame is a useful and motivating factor when it is aimed at people, but when it
Right.
is aimed at institutions, that is when shame is appropriate. And this is where the church had so much fucking egg on its face, but at the end of the day, the church, escaped completely unscathed from the whole ordeal, and Jonathan Streeter was maligned because of what he did, and the faithful Black Latter-day Saints felt the pain reignited because of the entire stunt.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, nothing actually good came from all of this,
At
except
all.
now we can reflect back on it and say this is how fucking white supremacist this institution is.
That
Right.
is a good
Sorry to
point.
talk over you,
Though.
Armin.
That is a good point, though, just to how people, to show how people can be racist without even knowing they're racist. They can do
Yes.
something like that and not even see how it affects the people that it's about.
Mhm.
Crazy.
Exactly. A lot of
Yeah.
lessons to be taken away.
When
Yeah.
I was criticizing Mormons as a child, and my mom told me that I needed to meet with the missionaries to learn about the Mormon religion because I was being a hypocrite. And I said, "Oh, well, you're right. If I'm criticizing something I don't know about, you're right. I would be a hypocrite. So bring over your missionaries." And so she brings over these teenagers called elders. And at the time, I think this was 1977, because it was early
Ah.
in 78, perhaps, because that at the time, I remember black people were not allowed in the church still. They weren't
Right.
allowed any position. At least they weren't allowed a position
In the
in the
priesthood
church.
or the temple.
Yes.
They could
Yes.
be members, but that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that still 78, or was that
78 is when they
Yeah,
changed it.
78.
Yep.
okay? So
Yeah.
that's how it, and so they hadn't made that correction yet.
Yeah.
And I saw it as a glaring flaw. And of course, when they did make the correction, I was wishing that I could visit that back on the missionaries too, because why would the infallible word of God change?
Right. It's
It was a
that's the other
hero
thing
moment
is, like,
again, though.
if everything in the Book of Mormon is supposed to be true, then it should have been there from the beginning. But yeah, anyway.